So my name is Lisa Conte. I'm the founder and the CEO of Jaguar Health. We've been doing this for about 32 years. And what we do is all drug discovery from plants that are used traditionally in tropical areas. So leveraging the knowledge of shamans and healers and working with material, plant material, natural material that's more likely to yield a safe and effective prescription drug because it comes from traditional medicines that have been in man for thousands of years. And in fact, that's what we were able to do. So we took a product. Oh, terrific. So you can go forward like 2 slides. Yeah, go forward like 2 slides, please. And we took a product all the way from a tree growing in the rainforest to a first-in-class FDA, there you go, right there, FDA-approved anti-secretory agent, first-in-class, meaning new way of treating diseases, new ways to think about managing and even curing diseases. The generic name is crofelemer. The trade name right now is Mytesi, and it is commercialized for the specialty market, which was fast-tracked at the request of the FDA for HIV, people living with HIV/AIDS who are managing diarrhea and even chronic diarrhea. What's wonderful is this product is organic, natural, it's sustainably harvested from the rainforest, it's fair trade, and it is an FDA-approved drug, and it's the only drug approved by the FDA under botanical guidance, which confers an exclusivity advantage since there's no pathway by which to generate a generic product. So even though we have lots of patents, over 100 that we'll talk about later on, we essentially have exclusivity forever. So if you go to the next slide, crofelemer is very important in a risk mitigated strategy of drug development for this company because it's a pipeline within a product. So we already have a product approved, and we have multiple follow-on indications. If you went back 1 slide, you can see there's like 8 follow-on indications. We can't do everything. So if you go to the next slide, the ones we have focused on are where there is a dramatic unmet medical need. And if you go to, I think it's slide probably, there you go, that one right there.
I got lost here in slide here. I think this is the one, right?
That's exactly the one. So where there is a dramatic unmet medical need, which is referenced by, or which maps to a very large market opportunity as well. So cancer therapy related diarrhea. Diarrhea is the #1 side effect associated with cancer therapy. We don't hear about it because there's nothing that has been tested and approved specifically for that. And people really, patients manage around the situation with food and diet, and it's really terrible. You do hear about chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, and that is approximately a $3 billion market currently. And you take those products for 2-3 days at the beginning of a chemo cycle, whereas diarrhea, with the new targeted therapies where patients are on therapy chronically for years at a time, are managing diarrhea and GI distress in a chronic situation, and very severe diarrhea, the type of diarrhea that you and I don't get from a bad meal around the corner, but that can put them in the hospital, that can cause organ shutdown. The other one that we have focused on is short bowel syndrome, and this is an orphan drug, a rare disease business model, and we have put the lead for that program in a company that we established in Europe called Napo Therapeutics, where we have orphan drug designation for short bowel syndrome. We have it in the US as well, but where there is a business model and a healthcare tradition that will allow this product in a meaningful way to get into patients and generate revenues in about a 12-month period of time with a proof of concept study. So if you go to the next slide, 2 major events for this company that's been around 30 years are occurring within about the next 12 to 15 month time frame. And that is the completion of a pivotal trial that we are in the midst of right now for cancer therapy related diarrhea for Mytesi. So expanding the label for a product that's already approved and already being sold in the United States. And then for Napo Therapeutics, which is a company we established in Europe, completing a proof of concept that will lead to expanded patient access program that's available in Europe, not available in the United States, to bring on meaningful product revenues. And because there is an exclusive license agreement from Jaguar to Napo Therapeutics, there is an equal sharing in each result that the respective companies produce to the other company. And then just as we did with an exclusive license to Napo Therapeutics, we have global unencumbered rights to crofelemer, and Jaguar is looking to do business development deals in other territories around the country, and you can expect 1 or 2 of those to occur in the next year. So what else is happening in the next year? Well, we are in the midst of these major 2 clinical events with short bowel syndrome and cancer therapy-related diarrhea. For Jaguar, it's the year of the dog, not the year of the tiger, it's the year of the dog. And we were very excited that in December, so just 2 months ago, crofelemer got approved for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs. And that product is called Canalevia, and that product will start to generate revenues in the second quarter of this year, so literally just around the corner. And there's a lot of activity associated with launching that product because it's building awareness of cancer incidence and prevalence, cancer treatment opportunities, and management of comfort for the dog and quality of life for the whole family, specifically the GI symptoms, with major campaigns that we will be taking on throughout the year. So if you go
Yeah, well,
forward,
I just to jump in here for one quick second, I think I was reading somewhere that some very popular dogs get cancer a lot, such as golden doodles and Irish setters and things like that.
You're exactly right. I mean, dogs are just so fascinating, right? Because there's big dogs, there's little dogs, there's purebreds, there's not purebreds. There's a major study that has gone on for, I think, like a decade now, looking specifically at cancers in golden retrievers. And actually, if you go to the next slide, slide 9, that has those different colored bars, over 50% of dogs over 10 are going to get diarrhea. Are going to get cancer. And I think golden retrievers, the number is even north of that. So you're exactly right. So to generate awareness about your type of breed and your age of dog, even your geography. So sometimes dogs are like the canary in the mine here. You see cancer rates in dogs, for example, on Long Island, where you also have accelerated rates of breast cancer in women. So a lot of the way crofelemer works, the mechanism by which it works, the site at which it works in the gut, is highly conserved among mammals. So what's going on in the dog is very predictive of what's going on in the human. Same thing, you have about 40% of dogs who are on chemotherapy have to go off because of the GI side effects, because of the diarrhea, because you can't talk to a dog and say it's going to be terrible for a couple of months, but then, you know, we're working on putting your cancer in remission. That comfort to the dog is even more important than the comfort in a human situation. And of course, the whole household, it just doesn't work if you have had a dog that's losing control on your rugs and your beds and throughout the household. On the financial side, we don't put out guidance, but we would expect a specialty market opportunity for Canalevia, similar to what we're seeing on the human side for HIV, but a big difference between human and animal prescription products in the United States is the veterinary business is a pay out of pocket business. So we have great predictability between our gross and our net. Whereas on the human side, there's a lot of variability based on what patients are on government programs, what are the level of chargebacks, particularly during pandemic, when people living with HIV/AIDS may be losing their private insurance and going on to government programs. So this is a very exciting, a lot of exciting activity throughout the next year, which will continue thereafter, but then of course will be supplemented by those human pivotal trial results in the early access program for short bowel syndrome. If you go to the next slide, I did mention risk mitigation. So drug development, of course, you know, is a risk-based, long, very expensive business. What we've done, we've focused almost all the efforts of the company on follow-on indications of a drug that's already approved. The 2 most common reasons why new drug applications fail are safety and manufacturing. So Mytesi is already out there on the market. So we obviously have a supply chain that works all the way from a tree in the rainforest to a bottle in essentially any pharmacy in the United States. And Mytesi is approved currently for a chronic indication. So we have chronic safety. We have remarkable tolerability data where in dozens of published clinical trials, thousands of patients, you never see a difference from placebo in all these patients. So It's a matter of designing those pivotal trials for the right endpoint for our mechanism of action, demonstrating statistical significance to the satisfaction of the regulatory agencies, and then expanding the opportunity to promote a product that is already on the market. So if we go to slide 12, we'll tell you a little bit about what is unique about this first-in-class agent. What's important is what it does and what it doesn't do. So crofelemer is an anti-secretory agent that this is the key verb, the key word in our package insert. It normalizes gut function. So what happens with watery diarrhea, which could also be due to some sort of inflammation, is you have an insult to the inside wall of the intestine, which, as I said, could be chronic inflammation. It could be a toxin from a cholera or infectious agent. It could be a drug. It can be an IBS. There are certain hormones that are elevated. That disruption opens up channels that are hyperactive. Salts go into the gut, water comes in based on osmosis, and that's the diarrhea that goes out. So what crofelemer does is it works locally. It's a pill you swallow, goes into the intestine. It normalizes that ion flow, but only in a hyperactive situation. So if you're perfectly normal, you can swallow a whole bottle of crofelemer and nothing happens. But in a hyperactive situation, it normalizes the ion flow, which normalizes the water flow, specifically mitigates the dehydration, and does so without interfering with, for example, normal peristaltic activity, without interfering with any of the other function of the gut. So this is really, really important in complicated patients where you don't want to interfere with their life-saving medicines. Think about Crohn's disease, IBD, as well as cancer, as well as HIV. What crofelemer does not do is when we think about Imodium or loperamide, these are opioids, and they basically work by the mechanism of constipation. And obviously you can't stay constipated chronically, so these are completely inappropriate and not labeled to be used on a chronic basis. And you can't stay constipated forever, so there's bloating, there's pain, there's rebound diarrhea. So we're not an opioid. We don't have that risk of constipation. We're not an antibiotic, so we don't have risk of resistance or tolerance. And so this is something, crofelemer, that can be used in a well-tolerated, safe way in both an acute or chronic situation, but the advantages are really highlighted in chronic, complicated patients, and that's why we have focused on those patients for the initial approvals and expansion. So if you go to slide 14, shots on goal is what we're all about, multiple shots on goal for crofelemer. And the cancer therapy is one that we are focused on. Just as in dogs, there were 3 publications last year at ASCO that showed in human cancer patients, 40+% of the time, patients are going off their life-saving therapy because of diarrhea, or they're having to go to a subtherapeutic dose. We also, these publications, which were third party, also showed that it costs about 3 times as much to take care of a cancer patient who's dealing with diarrhea. And that's an indication of how severe this is. Why does it cost so much? Because they end up in the hospital, they have to get rehydrated, you have to worry about organ shutdown. And there were even a couple of patients who died in clinical trials with targeted therapy because of the level of dehydration. So if you go to the next slide, the key factor here is that we are in the midst of this 256 patient double-blind placebo-controlled trial, the last bullet point on the page there, and we expect to have the last patient enrolled in the beginning of 2023. So within about a 12 to 15 month time frame, we're going to have that really important thing that only occurs in the pharmaceutical industry, where after years and years and tens of millions of dollars, you're looking for one number. What is that p-value on the primary endpoint? And this trial was designed by the chief scientific officer that designed our successful trial to get Mytesi approved for HIV, after working with the FDA and key opinion leaders and scientific advisors in the oncology field for about 18 months to be sure that we had the trial design that would capture the mechanism of action for the first in class of how crofelemer works. So you're on to the next slide, stay right there. And now I'm going to shift to the other big event in the next 12, 15 months, and that is short bowel syndrome. What that is we have an intestine that's anywhere from 20 to 25 feet. Short bowel is when you have 5 feet or less. You may have as little as 30 centimeters. And this is a catastrophic situation that can be due to an accident, could be to cancer requiring resection, congenital, could be to inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, but for whatever reason, it's a small population, but very heterogeneous. And what happens with these patients is they don't have enough of a length of intestine to absorb the nutrients of life, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the fats, the minerals, vitamins, etc. So these patients who go into intestinal failure end up on parenteral nutrition, can be up for 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's terrible, and it's not a replacement for what occurs naturally. So if you go to the next slide, what we're looking to do is intervene by decreasing the secretions into this short bowel, give the patient a greater opportunity for him or her to absorb their own nutrients of life. And if you can decrease it by even 10, 15, 20%, we're talking about high value to the patient and to the healthcare system, where you're talking about reimbursement in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, because it costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, with complications to take care of these patients. And a single payer healthcare system in Europe recognizes the value of getting the patients on these therapies very early, as soon as you have proof of concept data, rather than the fragmented, crazy incentives that you have in the US healthcare system. So if you go to the next slide with the pretty map on it, this is being pursued in Europe in a company that we established because, among other reasons, the incentives that I talked about there. And there is a proof of concept study that is initiating right now, an investigator-initiated trial. There'll probably be 2 or 3 of them. One of them is occurring in Abu Dhabi, where there's a higher rate of congenital issues because of culture of consanguineous marriages and marrying within the family. That data should be out by the end of the year, the beginning of 2023. And again, that proof of concept data in Europe is a precedent for expanded patient access and meaningful revenue generation. Napo Therapeutics we are not only have a license agreement with them from Jaguar, but we're also well over the majority shareholder of that company. So we get the benefit of the equity value and the equity ownership in that company as well. So if you go to slide 21, now we're going to talk about the current turnover for the approved indication of Mytesi for HIV in the United States. So if you go to those nice graphs, right back where the graphs are, so you can see in the second quarter of 2020, our revenues went up like 4 or 5-fold, both the gross and the net. So what happened there? This is the first product we ever commercialized in the United States, and we needed to learn a lot about prior authorizations and many of the obstacles and the chargebacks that come from insurance companies and government programs. So we pulled ourselves together and implemented a comprehensive patient access program in the second quarter of 2022. Coincidentally, that's when the pandemic and shelter at home hit as well. So this was all occurring while our reps really weren't having any direct face time with the targets, with the physicians and the healthcare professionals. As you get into late 2021, we also implemented a specialty pharma model, which provides even more services to the patient. So think about when you go to a pharmacy and you get text saying, come pick up your prescription, come refill your prescription, that type of service and beyond. That is a just-in-time inventory purchase system, whereas prior to that, prior to the second quarter of 2021, we were in a warehousing model that held about 60 to 70 days of inventory. And according to GAAP, we needed to recognize that revenue when it went into the warehouse. So throughout the second and third quarter of 2021, our prescriptions were growing, but our sales did not reflect it because it was a buy down, or it was a transfer over of inventory from this warehousing model to a just-in-time model. However, that revenue had already been recognized. That is completed now. And when our K is filed, which will be in mid to late March of this year will be the first time that the benefits, the financial benefits of being in the specialty pharmaceutical model, as well as the patient benefits, but the financial benefits will be recognized, and hopefully will be through a lot of this turmoil for other factors going on in the market. And that will be a nice base from which to have the value in the company be re-recognized.
Lisa, we got about 5 minutes.
I'll be done in 5 minutes. Okay.
Even
So if you go
better.
to the next slide with that pretty flower there, this is a small program that we have, but it's mobilizing. It's called Entheogen Therapeutics Initiative. That's psychoactive and psychedelic plants for mental health disorders and mood disorders, a very hot area right now. We have a library of 2,300 plants that we have collected over a 30-year period of time. This is mobilizing and getting some value from an asset that we have that's not costing us any money. So it's already in our library. We have a fabulous scientific strategy team that identified these plants being used with traditional healers, and we've rejuvenated that scientific strategy team, and we're in discussions to partner with those companies that are well resourced, that are looking for new ways of treating mental health disorders, but they're all chasing the same 7 compounds right now: psilocybin and MDMA and ketamines. Here's an opportunity for second generations and do what we do best: the botanical development, the characterization, and the isolation and reproducibility of the plant material. So you can look for a deal in that area in 2022 as well. So if you go to the next slide, 23, it's an indication of, we got a lot of news, and it's meaty news. We got business development deals, we got new product approvals, we got new product launches. We have these 2 major pieces of data coming out in the next 12 to 15 months, but a lot of news prior to that. We're very highly retail held, so we have a lot of volume. Sometimes retail turns on you, but when retail sees what's going on, it actually can sort of accelerate the recovery of our valuation. If you go to slide 24, we have a pretty clean balance sheet at this point. There are no warrants outstanding that are in the hands of traders who are trading around the warrants. The warrants are, for the most part, gone. The few that are left are at very, very high prices and are all held by very, very long-term investors. So it's a very clean balance sheet at this time. Go to slide 25. There's 10 of us who've been together for over 15 years. 3 of us who've been together for over 32 years, and it's one of the reasons why we can do so much with less than 50 people. We're a little big pharmaceutical company. We manufacture product, distribute product, we have a whole quality system, we sell product, we promote, and we have major development activities going on in the pipeline because each one of us has such depth of institutional knowledge about every last little piece of data about this product. Let's zip right over to slide 27. So just to recap what we've done here, we are a commercial stage company in currently a specialty market. Another word for that is relatively small, very important, but relatively small. We do have major development efforts going on for this pipeline within a product. 2 key points, I can't say that enough, 2 key events that will happen at about the same time, 12 to 15 months. See cancer therapy related diarrhea, a blockbuster opportunity for patient unmet need, as well as all the stakeholders and shareholders that will benefit from that as well. And then short bowel syndrome, which is a classic rare disease business model. I think I neglected to say that that is projected to be a $5 billion market in the next couple of years. For the most part, we are funding our current programs with non-dilutive dollars that are associated with a royalty deal that we have. Our last reported cash was about $30 million. So we are in good shape for funding those programs. And we do have a new product that we are getting ready to commercialize in the second quarter of this year, Canalevia, crofelemer for chemotherapy-induced diarrhea in dogs, very predictive of the human situation. In fact, there's another dog product, exercise-induced diarrhea, which is scheduled to get approved by the end of this year. We have an exclusive license agreement in Europe with Napo Therapeutics, and not only do we have the benefits of the license, but we also are well over the majority shareholder, so we will have the equity value from that company as well, which is a private company. Strong management team here, as well as Napo Therapeutics has a team that has historical orphan drug rare disease business and development experience in Europe. And the last point, we do have 145 patents issued right now. We file new patents all the time. However, because we are the only oral drug approval under botanical guidance, we essentially have exclusivity forever, which is really nice when negotiating, for example, business development deals and putting a terminal value on the technology. And thank you very much for listening. And that is the completion of my presentation and the opportunity.
Julia, I'm sorry, Lisa, so just quick questions. So you're listed on NASDAQ?
We are listed on NASDAQ. Jaguar is, yes.
And did you have an IPO or you reverse merger into a shell? What was the vehicle used?
We went public in 2000, when was it? 2015. However, at that time, we were just an animal health company because the human technology was tied up in a legal dispute with a commercial partner that was not commercializing it. Took 6 years for that to complete. And then in 2018, the animal health company brought in the human technology, and then we became primarily a human health company at that time.
And are you running a SPAC right now as well on the periphery, or?
Napo Therapeutics, which is a company that we established under license from Jaguar. So we established that company under license in Europe. As I said, we've been funding our programs with non-dilutive dollars. That company got funded primarily from a SPAC that was established in Europe. So that's how Napo Therapeutics got funded. And then Jaguar had made a major financial contribution to the SPAC, which allows us to maintain well over majority ownership of Napo Therapeutics and therefore get the equity value as well as the license value.
And you talked about some ways where you're able to self-finance off of existing revenue that's coming in and licensing agreements. Is that correct?
I didn't hear what you said. I'm so sorry.
You're able to finance off of licensing agreements and existing revenue?
We can't completely finance the company, but we have matched a royalty deal that we did off of Mytesi current sales to the funding that's necessary for the cancer program. So we do look to match non-dilutive financing to each of our programs. So the SPAC financing for Napo Therapeutics for short bowel syndrome, the Mytesi royalty deal for the CTD program. We have a deal around a priority review voucher for a cholera program that we are moving forward, a tropical disease priority review voucher.
Perfect, great. Well, listen, that's really fantastic, and love to hear about the progress you're making. I think that this whole pet-oriented dog cancer is a big issue, and especially people don't realize that a lot of these poodle mixtures are getting a high rate of cancer way before most dogs' lifespan. So I have a golden doodle. It's covered with all kinds of lumps because it's getting it's almost 9 years old, right? And so then the question is, do you buy insurance? How do you cover? I mean, obviously, because cancer is not a cheap treatment to take care of in a dog. So, but it's very interesting, and I'm glad that you guys are solving at least that one issue and then the other ones that you mentioned as well. So, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.